I collapsed on the floor. I couldn't breathe. My daughter was trembling beside me. My mother was crying, murmuring, "I'm sorry, if only you two would just disappear." This was my 35th birthday. That morning had begun like any other autumn Sunday. Soft sunlight streaming through the apartment window cast warm streaks of light across the living room carpet. I work as an accountant. My days spent dealing with numbers demand precision, but that suits me just fine. In life, there are things you can predict and things you can't. I've always chosen the former. "Mommy, are we going to Grandma's house?" my 5-year-old daughter Lily said happily. She grabbed the hem of my skirt with her small hand, looking up at me with eyes full of anticipation. Lily adored my mother. Every Sunday, we visited my mother's house. It was our routine. As I drove down Oak Street, I thought about my mother, Margaret. Since my father died 5 years ago, she'd been living alone. Lately, she'd been forgetting things more often. Last month, the doctor diagnosed her with mild dementia. She seemed unwilling to accept that reality. I, too, didn't want to acknowledge that my mother was getting older. My mother's house is in a quiet suburban neighborhood. A small house with white walls and a green door. The yard, where my father used to tend the lawn every weekend when he was alive, is still beautifully maintained. I've hired a management company to take care of it. It had become too difficult for my mother to handle alone. When I rang the doorbell, my mother greeted us with a smile. "Grace, happy birthday." Lily came too. Her voice was bright, but she looked tired somehow. There were faint dark circles under her eyes. Was she not sleeping well? A sweet aroma filled the kitchen. My mother had baked my favorite chocolate cake. On the counter sat a carefully wrapped cake. It was her specialty. When I was a child, she always made this cake for my birthday. That tradition continues to this day. It's my special cake. "I worked hard to make it this year too," my mother said. But her voice seemed to lack its usual confidence. Her hands were trembling slightly. Her habit of putting her hands in and out of her apron pockets was more frequent than usual today. "Isn't Ruth coming?" I asked. "My sister Ruth isn't working now. I'd heard she's been hanging around my mother's house lately." My mother always took Ruth's side. When I said something strict, she defended Ruth. Sisterly relationships are complicated. Especially after you become adults. "Ruth said she had something to do," my mother answered. Something about those words didn't sit right. For a moment, her eyes seemed to dart away. But I didn't pursue it further. In fact, I thought I'd be able to spend more time with my mother without Ruth there. When we moved to the living room, my mother sat on the sofa looking tense. Usually she'd be more relaxed, but today she sat with her back straight, hands clasped on her lap. She kept looking at the clock. As if she were waiting for something. "Are you okay, Mom?" I asked. She forced a smile, but it was awkward. "Yes, I'm fine. Just a little tired. When you get older, even baking a single cake is hard work." Her words were convincing. I worried about her health, but I didn't think any further about it. When Lily begged, "Grandma, I want to eat cake," my mother stood up and headed to the kitchen. "Yes, let's eat it." As I watched her walk away, I felt a small sense of unease in my chest. But I didn't yet know what it was. My mother brought the cake box and set it on the table. Her hands were trembling as she opened the box. "Grace, you're a good daughter," my mother said suddenly. "Thank you for everything." Those words had the ring of a farewell. "Mom, what's wrong?" I asked. She shook her head. "It's nothing. I just wanted to say it." She picked up the knife and began cutting the cake. She placed plates in front of me and Lily, then took her own portion last. "Now, let's eat," she said. The cake was delicious. My mother's chocolate cake was always perfect. Moist sponge with rich chocolate cream. Lily's eyes sparkled as she brought small forkfuls of cake to her mouth. "It's delicious, Grandma," my daughter said. My mother smiled, but the smile was somehow sad. I took a bite too. Within the sweetness, there was a faint bitterness. It tasted a little different than usual. But it was my mother's homemade cake. Maybe because of her age, she'd gotten the recipe slightly wrong. That's what I thought, and I continued eating without concern. My mother was also eating the cake on her plate. The hand holding the fork was trembling. 1 bite, 2 bites. Her expression stiffened. "It's delicious," she said, but her voice had no strength. She drank water repeatedly. Was she thirsty? The living room clock pointed to 2 in the afternoon. Outside the window, the autumn wind swayed the trees. A peaceful Sunday afternoon. An ordinary time when nothing should happen. That's what I believed. 5 minutes passed. Lily suddenly dropped her fork. "Mommy," my daughter said in a small voice. "I feel bad." Lily's face had turned pale. I rushed to my daughter's side in a panic. "What's wrong, Lily?" I put my hand on her forehead. No fever. But her breathing was shallow. At that moment, I felt something wrong too. A sensation like my chest was being squeezed. I couldn't breathe properly. My heart was pounding wildly. I felt dizzy. What is this? Food poisoning? No, this is something else. I tried to speak. But no voice came out. When I looked at my mother, she had slid from the sofa onto the floor. Her face was ashen, her lips turning purple. My mother's eyes were staring at me. In those eyes, fear and regret were mixed together. An ambulance, I thought desperately. Where's my phone? On the table. I reached out. But my fingers were shaking and I couldn't grasp it properly. My vision was blurring. Lily was clinging to my arm. "Mommy, I'm scared," my daughter was crying. My mother, collapsed on the floor, was trying to say something. Her lips were moving. I desperately tried to make out her words. "I'm sorry," my mother whispered. "Grace, I'm sorry." But I had no choice. My mother's words entered my ears. "If only you two would disappear." She was crying. "Ruth told me. You're planning to put me in a facility, aren't you? You're going to abandon me, aren't you? That's why I..." The meaning of my mother's words swirled in my head. I was going to put my mother in a facility. I'd never even considered such a thing. What was she talking about? I couldn't understand. But my body was honest. Poison. This is poison. My mother had poisoned us. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. But my mother's words continued. "Ruth said if I put sleeping pills in the cake, you'd both fall asleep. Then she'd take care of everything," she said. But it was wrong. This is. My mother's voice cut off. Her body was convulsing. My consciousness was fading too. Lily's crying was becoming distant. "No. I can't collapse here. I have to protect my daughter. But my body won't move." At that moment, I heard the sound of the front door opening. "Grace," someone was shouting. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She must have noticed something wrong through the window. Mrs. Chen was a former nurse. She rushed into the room. "My God, what happened?" Mrs. Chen shouted. I desperately reached out my hand. I tried to say, "Cake, poison." But the words wouldn't come. Mrs. Chen immediately took out her cell phone. Mrs. Chen's voice grew distant. My consciousness was fading. The last thing I saw was my mother's form collapsed on the floor. Her hand was reaching toward me. Was that hand asking for help, or was it an apology? I couldn't tell. I heard the sound of sirens. An ambulance had arrived. The door opened and paramedics came in. Multiple voices flew back and forth. Breathing is weak. Pulse is unstable. Pupils are dilated. One of the medics peered into my eyes. Can you hear me? I tried to nod but my body wouldn't move. What did you eat? The medic asked. Mrs. Chen answered. The cake on the table. The medic looked at the cake plates. This is toxic poisoning, the medic shouted. Get to the hospital immediately. Prepare the antidote. All three are critical. Hurry. I was placed on a stretcher. The ceiling flowed past. Lily was also being placed on another stretcher. My daughter's small hand was trying to grasp something in the air. What happened to my mother? Was she being transported too? In the ambulance, I thought desperately. My mother's words. Ruth's name. The lie about sleeping pills. This wasn't an accident. It was something planned. But by whom? My mother. Or Ruth. An oxygen mask was placed on my face, and breathing became a little easier. The medic stuck an injection needle in my arm. It's the antidote. Hang in there, the medic said. I desperately tried to stay alive. For Lily. To learn the truth. We arrived at the hospital. Blinding lights. Crowds of people. Doctors' voices. Nurses' footsteps. Everything was chaotic. I tried to maintain consciousness. But the darkness was dragging me in. The last thing I heard was a doctor's voice. This patient might survive. But the elderly woman. The doctor's words cut off. I fell into darkness. What happened to my mother? Was Lily safe? And where was Ruth now? Before my consciousness completely cut out, I understood one thing. This was attempted murder. And the targets were me and Lily. Was my mother used as a tool, or was she an accomplice? The truth was still in the darkness. I don't know how long it took to emerge from the darkness. When I opened my eyes, I saw a white ceiling. The hospital smell. That distinctive smell of disinfectant and medicine mixed together. Tubes were connected all over my body. My throat was parched. Grace, you're awake, a nurse called out to me. A young female nurse was standing beside me. Don't worry. You survived. Your daughter is safe too. At the nurse's words, I breathed a sigh of relief. Lily was safe. That alone was enough. But the next moment, terror struck. My mother. Margaret. I tried to speak, but my throat hurt and I couldn't form words. The nurse seemed to sense something from my appearance. About your mother, the detective will explain. Please rest now. Detective. That word told the whole story. My mother wasn't alive. I closed my eyes. Tears overflowed. My mother was dead. She tried to kill us, and then she herself died. It didn't seem real. I wished it were a nightmare. A few hours later, I was moved to another hospital room. Lily was sleeping in the bed right next to mine. Looking at my daughter's sleeping face, my heart settled down just a little. My daughter was alive. That was the only salvation. There was a knock on the room door. The man who entered was in his 50s. He wore a suit and showed me his badge. I'm Detective Harris. May I speak with you? The detective's expression was stern, but his eyes held sympathy. I nodded. The detective sat in a chair and took out a notebook. First, there's something I need to tell you. Your mother, Margaret Miller, passed away last night. The detective's words pierced my chest. I'd known. But when I actually heard it in words, the weight of reality was different. The cause of death was potassium cyanide poisoning, the detective continued. The cake you and your daughter ate had potassium cyanide mixed into it. Your mother ingested a lethal dose. You two had relatively small amounts, so you survived. Potassium cyanide. Hearing the name of the poison, I trembled. Where did my mother get such a dangerous thing? No, wait. I remembered my mother's words. Ruth had instructed her. My mother had been deceived. I squeezed out my voice. My mother had dementia. She'd just been diagnosed recently. I don't think she understood what she was doing. The detective nodded. We're aware of that. That's precisely why we believe this case has another dimension. Another dimension. At those words, I leaned forward. After your mother passed away, we investigated the scene. We found several interesting things at your mother's house. The detective opened a file and took out photographs. Look at this, the detective showed me the photo. It was a picture of a notebook. On the page, something was written in neat handwriting. This was found on the bedside table in your mother's room. I stared at the photograph. The words written there froze my blood. Grace is trying to put mother in a facility. Grace only wants the inheritance. It's my duty to protect mother. Make mother suspect her sister. Under the guise of sleeping pills, use a certain method. This was Ruth's handwriting. My sister's penmanship. I'd seen letters and notes from Ruth many times. There was no mistake. Detective, this was written by my sister Ruth. I said in a trembling voice. That's correct, the detective answered. We've confirmed it with handwriting analysis as well. Furthermore, this notebook contained detailed plans. The steps to brainwash your mother, the method to obtain poison, and even the plan for inheritance afterward. Inheritance. With that word, I began to understand everything. This was a murder plan for the sake of inheritance. Using my mother as a tool to kill me and Lily. Then take all the property. Ruth had plotted it. There's more, the detective took out another document. Your mother's dementia diagnosis, and a new will in your mother's name. In this will, all assets were to be inherited by Ruth. The date of creation was 3 months ago. Right after your mother was diagnosed with dementia. I clenched my fists. Ruth had been methodical. Learning of my mother's dementia, she'd moved immediately. She brainwashed my mother, had the will rewritten, and then used her as a tool for murder. My mother's last words came back. Ruth said it was sleeping pills. Even to the end, my mother had believed in her sister. We also found records of the poison purchase, the detective said. It was purchased online. Payment was with Ruth's credit card. Delivery address was your mother's. Furthermore, $2,000 was withdrawn from your mother's bank account. Ruth made the withdrawal. The evidence was complete. But my heart felt torn apart by anger and sadness. Ruth was my sister. Family by blood. And yet for money, she tried to kill us. She deceived our mother, used her as a tool, and killed our mother too. We've also obtained testimony from Mrs. Chen, the detective continued. According to her, Ruth frequently visited your mother's house and spoke badly about you. She repeatedly said that Grace was trying to put her in a facility, that Grace was after the money. I held my head in my hands. Ruth had poured poison into my mother's confused mind. She kept feeding lies to a mother whose judgment had declined due to dementia. And my mother began to suspect me, her daughter. She came to think of her beloved daughter as an enemy. We also detected fingerprints on the cake box, the detective said. Ruth's fingerprints. Ruth probably prepared the cake and mixed in the poison. Then she instructed your mother to have you two eat it. Your mother, believing it was sleeping pills, complied. But my mother ate it too, I said. Why did she eat it herself? The detective let out a deep sigh. Probably out of guilt. Your mother may have realized something was wrong at the last moment. So by eating it herself, she tried to share your fate. Or perhaps she got the amount wrong. I pictured my mother's anguished face. She'd realized it. That this wasn't sleeping pills. But she couldn't stop it. Whether from fear of Ruth or confusion from dementia. My mother couldn't make the right decision to the end. Ruth's whereabouts, the detective began when the door was knocked. Another officer entered. Detective, we've apprehended Ruth Miller. The detective stood up. I see. Take her to the interrogation room. The detective looked at me. You and your daughter are safe. Ruth Miller will be charged with murder. It will be difficult from here on out, but we'll protect you. At the detective's words, I nodded slightly. Alone in the hospital room, I stared at Lily's sleeping face. My daughter knew nothing. Not that Grandma had died, not that her aunt had tried to kill us. Someday, the day would come when I'd have to tell my daughter this truth. But for now, I just think about protecting her. Outside the window, the sun was setting. My birthday ended like this. I'd lost my mother, been betrayed by my sister, but survived with my daughter. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Lily still needed observation, so she would remain hospitalized for 2 more days. Sitting at my daughter's bedside, holding her small hand, I thought about what would happen from here. Detective Harris contacted me, saying an important discovery had been made. The detective came to the hospital's meeting room. We sat facing each other across a table. The detective's expression was even more serious than last time. Grace, we found new evidence. The situation is far more serious than we initially thought. The detective opened a file. We examined your mother's bank transaction records. Over the past year, $150,000 had been illegally withdrawn by Ruth. Your mother's signature is there, but according to handwriting analysis, at least half were forgeries. $150,000. At that amount, I was speechless. Ruth had stolen that much money from my mother. Had she noticed? With dementia progressing, she might not have known. Or even if she noticed, she might have wanted to believe in her daughter. There's more, the detective took out another document. A life insurance policy in your mother's name, $500,000. The beneficiary was changed to Ruth 3 months ago. This signature is also suspected to be forged. When we checked with the insurance company, Ruth handled all the change procedures. $500,000. Combined with the inheritance, the amount Ruth was after was enormous. The house worth $800,000, my mother's savings of $600,000, stocks worth $400,000. Adding the life insurance and the money illegally withdrawn, the total came to over $2,300,000. We also seized Ruth's cell phone, the detective continued. It had numerous messages from debt collectors. Total debt of $400,000. From gambling. The payment deadline was this week. Everything connected. Ruth had been cornered. Unable to repay debts created by gambling. So she targeted my mother's assets. But she couldn't get them while my mother was alive. So she planned murder. And me and Lily were also in the way. With fewer heirs, everything would become Ruth's. Here's Ruth's plan, the detective continued his explanation. Have your mother use the poison to kill you and your daughter. Your mother gets arrested for attempted murder. With dementia, her criminal responsibility is questioned, and she's confined to a facility. Then Ruth becomes the guardian and can manage all the assets. Furthermore, when your mother passes away, she'd acquire over $2,300,000 with the inheritance and insurance money. It was a perfect plan. For Ruth. But there was one miscalculation. My mother ingested a lethal dose. With my mother's death, the plan fell apart. All the evidence became clear. Ruth is currently in custody, the detective said. She'll be charged with murder, attempted murder, fraud, and document forgery. Through her lawyer, she's claiming your mother did it on her own, but all evidence points to Ruth. I want to see Ruth, I said. I want to hear directly why she did such a thing. The detective shook his head. Not right now. The investigation is ongoing. But eventually, you'll face each other in court. That afternoon, Mrs. Chen visited the hospital. She brought a bouquet of flowers and sat at Lily's bedside. Grace, you're a strong woman. Even after something like this, you're standing up for your daughter's sake. She squeezed my hand. About your mother, if only I'd noticed earlier. Tears welled up in her eyes. I knew a little about what Ruth was saying to your mother. But I never imagined it went that far. What did you hear? I asked. Mrs. Chen let out a deep sigh. One day, the window was open and I heard Ruth's voice. She was saying, Grace is planning to put you in a facility, you're in the way. Your mother was crying. But I thought it was a family matter and didn't intrude. I couldn't blame her. Who could imagine that a real daughter would brainwash her mother and turn her into a tool for murder? But her testimony would be important in the trial. 2 weeks later, I met with a lawyer. Apart from the criminal trial against Ruth, I intended to file a civil lawsuit. Demand return of the $150,000 illegally withdrawn, invalidation of the forged will, and all damages. The lawyer was a middle-aged woman with an experienced expression. The evidence is solid. This is a winnable case. But be prepared. Ruth is your sister. You'll face each other in court. Are you okay with that? I nodded. Ruth is no longer my sister. She's a criminal who deceived my mother and tried to kill me and my daughter. I'll fight. The criminal trial began 3 months later. The courtroom was packed with people. It was being heavily reported in local news. As an attempted murder case using a mother with dementia, it was attracting attention. When Ruth appeared in court, I was surprised. My sister had lost weight and looked pale. She wore an orange prison uniform and was handcuffed. Ruth looked at me but quickly looked away. The prosecution's opening statement began. The prosecutor presented evidence piece by piece. The brainwashing notebook, poison purchase records, forged will, illegal bank transactions, change of insurance beneficiary. Everything indicated Ruth's plan. Mrs. Chen was called as a witness. She testified in a calm voice. I heard Ruth repeatedly tell Margaret that Grace was trying to put her in a facility. Margaret was confused. She told me she didn't know who to believe. My mother's diary was also submitted as evidence. I learned its contents for the first time. The diary chronicled my mother's suffering. Will Grace really abandon me? But Grace has always been kind. Ruth keeps warning me. But lately Ruth's eyes frighten me. On the last page of the diary was an entry from the day before my birthday. Tomorrow is Grace's birthday. I'll make a cake. Ruth prepared sleeping pills for me. But is this really sleeping pills? When I looked at the bottle, the label had been removed. When I asked Ruth, she got angry. She said, how dare I doubt her? I'm scared. My mother had realized it. But she couldn't stop it. Fear of Ruth and declining judgment from dementia had cornered her. My mother couldn't make the right choice to the end. Ruth's turn came. Her attorney tried to elicit testimony favorable to Ruth, but Ruth said nothing. She just sat silently. When the prosecutor began cross-examination, Ruth opened her mouth for the first time. Mom did it on her own, Ruth said. I didn't know anything. Mom had dementia and resented Grace. I tried to stop her. But Mom wouldn't listen. That's a lie, I screamed in my mind. The prosecutor calmly refuted. Then why was poison purchased with your credit card? Why are your fingerprints on the cake box? Why did you illegally withdraw $150,000 from your mother's account? Ruth couldn't answer. Her attorney objected, but the judge overruled. The evidence was clear. Ruth had no escape. The jury's verdict was swift. Guilty. On all charges, guilty. The judge pronounced the sentence. The defendant, Ruth Miller, is hereby sentenced to 25 years imprisonment for murder, attempted murder, fraud, and document forgery. The courtroom stirred. Ruth collapsed. No, that's not right, Ruth screamed. But no one was listening. The civil lawsuit also resulted in victory. The court ordered full return of the $150,000 illegally withdrawn. The forged will was invalidated, and my mother's original will became valid. In that will, the property was to be divided equally between me and Ruth. But now, Ruth had lost the right to receive it. The insurance company also sued Ruth. For attempted insurance fraud, they demanded massive compensation. All of Ruth's assets were seized. My sister had nothing left. Everything was over. Ruth was sent to prison. I'd won. But my heart was empty. My mother wasn't coming back. The family was destroyed. Victory was too bitter. 6 months passed. The day came to organize my mother's house. The real estate agent said if we sold the house, it would sell for $800,000. But I wasn't in a hurry. First, I wanted to see everything my mother had left behind. My mother's bedroom was unchanged from that day. After the police investigation ended, no one had touched it. When I opened the drawer of the bedside table, several old diary books came out. I picked up one and turned the pages. The diary chronicled my mother's daily life. Memories with my father, stories from when Ruth and I were children, and recent anxieties and confusion. As the pages progressed, my mother's handwriting became more disordered. The progression of dementia was evident in her writing. In one of the later pages was this entry: recently I've begun to doubt Ruth's words. Will Grace really abandon me? Grace has always been kind. But Ruth keeps saying it. I don't know what's true anymore. But I don't have the courage to face Grace. If it's really true, I'll be hurt. Tears overflowed. My mother had been torn between Ruth's words and her love for me. Dementia had robbed her of proper judgment. If only I'd visited more frequently. If only I'd noticed my mother's changes sooner. The regrets are endless. On the last page of the diary was the entry from the day before my birthday. Tomorrow, I'll make Grace's birthday cake. Ruth prepared sleeping pills for me. She says if I use this, Grace and Lily will sleep and Ruth will take care of everything. But is it true? When I looked at the bottle, the label had been removed. It feels wrong. I'm scared. But it's too late now. My mother had known. Yet she couldn't stop it. I closed the diary. Could I forgive my mother? I still didn't know. But my mother had also been a victim. 1 year later, Lily was receiving therapy. The memories of that day had left deep wounds in my daughter's heart. But children's resilience is wonderful. With the therapist's help, Lily gradually regained her smile. Mommy, Grandma was tricked, right? Lily said one day. Grandma wasn't bad, right? I hugged my daughter. That's right. Grandma loved you. She just got sick and couldn't think properly. I established a dementia support organization. Using part of my mother's inheritance, I started an elder abuse prevention program. To support dementia patients and their families, and to protect them from malicious people like Ruth. I didn't want my mother's death to be meaningless. Mrs. Chen and I remain close. One day, she said to me, "Grace, what do you think your mother thought at the end?" "I don't know," I answered. She smiled gently. "I'm sure she was glad she could protect you and her granddaughter. It was the wrong method, but in the end, she made the right choice." At her words, my heart felt a little lighter. My mother had eaten the poison herself. Was it from guilt, or was it an unconscious choice to protect us? I don't know the truth. But my mother was a mother to the end. A letter arrived from Ruth in prison. I hesitated whether to open it, but eventually did. On the stationery was a short message. "I won't ask you to forgive me. I was just insane. Pursued by debt, I couldn't make normal judgments. Using Mom, trying to kill you too, it's all my sin." I didn't write back. I have no intention of forgiving Ruth. But I also don't intend to be trapped by hatred. Ruth is no longer in my life. That's fine. We sold my mother's house. The inheritance was placed in a trust, allocated to Lily's education fund and the Dementia Support Organization's operating funds. We moved to a new apartment. In the living room, we displayed my mother's photograph. A smiling mother. From when she was still young and happy. One day, Lily looked at the photograph and said, "My teacher said I look like Grandma." My daughter was smiling happily. I smiled back. "Yes, you do look like her." Outside the window, a new season was about to begin. The spring breeze gently swayed the curtains. I would walk through the rest of life with my daughter. What is real family? It's not blood. It's not even trust. It's the will to try to protect each other. My mother was deceived. But in that final moment, she tried to protect us. Perhaps that's the answer. I'll keep living, looking forward. With my mother's memory. For my daughter's future. And so that such a tragedy never happens again. Because that's my mission as a survivor.